Hi, this is Greg Kilstrom. Welcome to the Agile World podcast, where we discuss customer experience, employee experience, and transformation in an agile age. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed on this show, you can go to my website at theagile.world and read my latest articles or get a copy of my latest book, The Center of Experience, a blueprint for creating an experience-led organization, now available on Amazon and other retailers. Hi, I'm Greg Kilstrom. Welcome to the Agile World podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about experience maturity and how different types of organizations have different levels of experience maturity. Having worked with a number of different types of companies over the years, I've come to realize that not everyone is starting from the same point. And so in order to have the best results, as with other related practices, we need to create a maturity model to really understand what recommendations to make, how to best make the most relevant recommendations. This practice is common in areas like data science and others where, again, the same rules apply, where you don't want to suggest something where the organization simply isn't ready, doesn't have the necessary people or platforms in place to really take advantage of it. So to do this, as part of creating the Center of Experience, we created what we're calling the Experience Maturity Model. And as other maturity models in other industries or practices have, it's a multi-step process. So we have 5 different stages depending on the level of maturity. So we start at the analyze phase, where at this point, an organization they have some functional competence in customer experience or employee experience, or possibly both. But there's no real formal practices, functions across the organization. So there are either a few people in some roles or a few things going on that are related to experience, but again, not a formal practice within. So while there's competence as far in some areas and there's awareness, there's not a lot of action at that point. The next stage what we call experiment. So this is where, again, there's beyond some functionality there. There's beyond awareness in the organization. At this point, trials are whether it's pilot projects or things like that, are being done to improve EX and CX. So the organization begins to implement initiatives to engage employees on the EX side, or to further the customer journey on the CX side. So experience and or marketing teams, maybe HR teams, they're performing tests, they're optimizing portions of the experience. So, at this stage, there's activity related to innovation and experience, both on the employee and the customer side, but there really isn't a cohesive strategy still, that ties all of this work together. So in other words, customer experience initiatives and teams are having success in a silo, but and maybe employee experience teams are as well, but they're not connected in a meaningful way. At this point, the organization probably has a good understanding, even across the company, that tying these things together or even doing CX or EX better would be beneficial. But again, no formal processes in place to really do that. The third stage of 5 we call influence. So at this point, experience pilots and experience activities, they're at that point where we call this influence, because an organization is able to actually measure the engagement from whether it's the employees on the EX side or customers on the CX side, or ideally both. And I call the combination of EX and CX brand experience. So ideally, at this point, the company is seeing some kind of measurable impact. It's not across every team. It's not as consistent as it would be in later stages of this maturity model, but experience and optimizing experience is having an effect, and a noticeable effect, on the organization. Enough so to prompt the company or organization to consider further investments and things like that. So as far as where most companies kind of sit currently, Hotjar did a CX survey this year in 2019, and surveying a lot of different kinds of companies. Most kind of sit between about 40% sit between stages 2 and 3. So a significant portion sit between that experiment and this influence phase. So again, in the from the competence standpoint, the programs, the EX and CX initiatives are influencing decisions. They're influencing how dollars are spent. They're even meaningfully influencing some KPIs and things like that. Again, enough to influence and persuade further investments. Awareness within the organization is pretty full at this point. So not only is there awareness of, yes, experience, both CX and EX are valuable, but also there's an increased focus on coordinating and sharing of learning between teams that are working on various experience initiatives. The fourth of 5 levels of maturity we call impact. So, to a greater degree than influence, at this point, there is a real tangible, set of results that are going on in the organization. So, as opposed to simply influencing some decisions, experience, whether it's CX or EX or ideally both tied together, it is really having an impact on the bottom line. And so making further investments, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's everyone at the business is starting to feel results in these investments. Employees are actively contributing, and they're not only are they contributing to the CX, the customer experience initiatives, but there's a great employee experience as well. And, they're actively contributing, feeling valued by their employer and satisfied with their work. And, by the same token, customers are feeling rewarded and valued. And these customers who feel rewarded become frequent customers, recommend more often to others, and they're posting positive reviews, bringing other customers into the fold. So somewhere between, I mentioned about 40% of companies are somewhere between stages 2 and 3. Between stages 3 and 4, there's about another 38% of companies. So really, the majority of companies is somewhere between, let's say 2.5 to 3.5 on this scale. So there's a lot of organizations that, what that means is they understand the importance. They are beginning initiatives. There's enough awareness within leadership as well as elsewhere in the company that that experience is important enough to make investments in. So that's I would regard that as a good thing. And obviously the goal is to get to a 5 on the scale of 1 to 5. But the fact that so many companies are here is a good thing. I shared the statistic in a previous episode where, as of a couple years ago, something like 60 some percent in the high 60s really felt like they were competing mostly on experience in their against their competitors, and that number is only going to increase. So the fact that these companies are realizing this and increasing their maturity according to this is a good thing. So, in this impact stage, from a competence standpoint, the organization has a very good understanding of not only how to do experience well, but how investments can contribute to the bottom line. It doesn't mean everything's perfect. There's always room to improve, but they do understand when they put money into an investment in customer experience or employee experience or tying both together, they understand that there will be impacts, positive impacts. Same thing with awareness. There's a high level of awareness that investing and having projects related to experience is a good thing. And from a team perspective, these teams at this stage in the maturity, they're talking a lot more to one another. IT is talking to HR, and marketing is talking to IT, and all of these different teams are talking with one another and really working with one another to this common goal. It's not so siloed. It's not a few ad hoc projects here and there. It's really a concerted effort to understand the customer journey, understand the employee journey, and really optimize for both. The fifth and final stage we call transform. So this is really where the previous stage called impact. Again, there's a positive and well known impact to the bottom line. When you get to this final stage, the business can truly transform because it's an experience-led organization. And what I mean by that is the understanding that when the experience is great, when employees have a great experience, they stay longer, they're more productive, they do better work, which leads to customers who have better products, have a better customer experience. They buy more often, they recommend more often. So this transformative effect happens when companies truly not only have invested in experience, but are really seeing these tangible results where they're really innovating in how they offer experience to these different audiences. According to that same survey of companies, those companies that would be mature or in this fifth stage of experience maturity, this is about 12% of companies. So, there's not a lot of organizations right now, very small percentage that can really claim to be in this transformative stage. And so, there's a lot of room to continue to grow. But once they get here, the organization, again, they're reaping benefits across EX and CX. Strategic initiatives across the board include experience as a key component, a key design element, as well as a key KPI. From an awareness perspective, this sharp focus on EX and CX as a competitive advantage is embedded throughout the whole organization. Again, it's not just something that we ought to do, or something that is measured and makes successful in some areas. It is truly a competitive advantage, and thus the company's continuously looking for ways to improve and expand processes, tooling, skills, all of those things, so they can invest in it, make it better. And ultimately, from an action perspective, continuous improvement is occurring across both customer experience and employee experience. Teams are working together. There's alignment across CX and EX from the strategy, design, implementation, and optimization standpoints. So this is measured by a number of different things. I think some of the indicators can improve, net promoter score, so NPS or net promoter score, or the employee net promoter score from the internal audiences, and this results in some real tangible results. So improved employee retention, which we all know, the cost to replace an employee could be anything from 33% of their salary. This is millions and millions of dollars for the enterprise. It improves employee productivity, increases customer loyalty, increases word of mouth referrals. So, there are real tangible benefits to increasing that maturity across the organization. In addition to these 5 levels of maturity, what we've done, the team at Cravity has done to develop this experience maturity model, is taken it a step further. And the way that we evaluate maturity is really based on 10 elements. And so when we work with an organization, what we like to do is, before we get too far down the road with them, assess this and, according to these 10 elements, really understand where are they, and across both CX and EX. And what we, undoubtedly find is that there are some areas where they're pretty strong, and don't need a lot of help, but there's other areas where they need some shoring up. And so, it's never a consistent on, all 10 of these elements that they're a 4. Sometimes they're a 5 on some things and a 2 on a couple others. And so it kind of averages out to where their overall maturity is. So I'll go through and kind of walk through each of these briefly. So the first element is strategy. So this refers to the executive and leadership's direction towards optimization of experience, how it maps to organizational priorities and objectives. So, the more mature an organization is, the more experience is going to be part of the overall strategy. As I was saying before, if experience is a key competitive advantage, it's going to be part of the strategic direction. Second item we refer to as ideation. So this is the process to identify, to plan, socialize experience initiatives that provide business impact and a return on investment and experience initiatives. So what this means is, there are ongoing processes and continuous processes that are being improved, being brainstormed, being worked out, and uh, ultimately implemented across the organization. So there is this constant ideation process going and related to experience. Third item is called cohesion. So this is how integrated and consistent things are across the organization. So this could be everything from, how different organizations within or different teams within the organization collaborate, how things are structured in a way that enables collaboration and cohesion, the roles and responsibilities that are created. Oftentimes there aren't roles that are specifically designed to work with experience, whether it's EX or CX. And finally, how is training done? What are people trained on? What does that look like? Are people only trained on the areas that directly relate to them, or do they get a better sense of experience as a whole? So, when this experience optimization, when it's prioritized across several business units, not just a single one, it means a more mature organization. Next item is culture. So, the organizational culture should be approached as the operating system that it really is. And, the important thing to know here is that organizational culture isn't just employee culture, it's also the customer culture. And, this maturity model, as well as the center of experience model, um, is really based around tying employee and customer experience together. So, part of achieving this successful culture is making sure that it's aligned. And I'm going to talk a lot more about organizational culture in another episode of this podcast. But suffice to say that an aligned culture is not a monolithic culture. It doesn't mean that everyone is exactly the same. In fact, diversity is actually a benefit and a certainly a metric of success within an organization. But everyone aligned to a common purpose and set of goals, that's what we really want. Next item is environment. So, this could be the physical environment, it could be the virtual environment, digital environment. What does that look like? What are the opportunities, as well as, how are things currently handled within the organization? Next item is intelligence. So this relies a lot on analytics, data science, how AI, machine learning are handled within the organization. So what is the organization doing with data? How well is it using it to not only measure experience, but improve experience? Then we have technology. So, this is the technical foundation for experience, including the basis for the people, processes, and platforms to perform data science related tasks and projects. So it relates to intelligence, but it includes much more. It includes infrastructure, integration, supporting tools, things like that. For an organization to mature with experience, there should be an IT environment and culture that supports improvement of experience. So, as you can see, all of these things really tie together. Technology on its own certainly can't create a great experience, but technology combined with environment, combined with culture, many other things starts to create this holistic brand experience. Next item is process. So, it's great to have a good set of tools, people, processes, technology, but what are the processes to prepare, to model, to test, to deploy, and to monitor and ultimately optimize and adjust? So there needs to be processes to do these things. And, we measure that as part of this maturity model. Next is compliance. So, this could be everything from how, regulations and things like that are followed. So, whether that's HIPAA compliance, PII, GDPR, things like that, to internal compliance. So, when there is a process, when there is a process in place, is it followed? What happens if it's not followed? How are we auditing all of these things? And how are we making sure that what are the rules in place if something isn't followed? Or, even better, what are the rules in place to actually follow something in the first place? Finally, we have the results. So, while we talk about intelligence and we talk about platforms and things like that, ultimately an organization needs to see results and be able to demonstrate results and be measuring for those. So that's the final of those 10 elements in the maturity model. So applying the maturity model, again, as I mentioned, the way we do it at Cravity is we provide this as an assessment, work with organizations to do this, and really identify the place that an organization is in their experience maturity, and then we work with them to either shore up those gaps where in each of those 10 elements, there may be some areas where there's some large gaps, or overall they may be at a 3 and they want to move to a 4, and we work with them to figure out, okay, well, given the current structure, the teams, the people, the process, all of that stuff, how are we going to move the needle on that? And ultimately, it's not just one thing. It's a combination of many, many things. So I'll continue to talk about several of these elements more as I talk about some of the components of the Center of Experience. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile World podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. I'm your host, Greg Kilstrom. You can learn more and get a copy of my latest book, The Center of Experience, from my website at theagile.world or on Amazon or other retailers. Until next week, stay agile.